Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story. Sometimes you can sense something big is going to happen before it does. The air feels electric, colors seems that little bit more vivid, the clues are everywhere if you're sensitive to them. And on that night, this was enhanced by the fact we were in Paris in August, on a beautifully warm night. We were sitting in the open air in the mezzanine of a brasserie. It was a great venue with an amazing vibe, and busy that night, but not too crowded. Delicious smells of cooking carried on the air. My wife Tiana got up to go to the bathroom, leaving myself and Topher at the table. I watched heads turn as Tiana made her way through the crowd. The French guys didn't play against stereotype as they ostentatiously checked her out. Realizing I could see what they were up to, they would look away shame-faced, perhaps worried I'd head over in a rage. I didn't mind. I loved the thought of guys thinking about Tiana when they were with their girlfriends or wives later that night, or when they were enjoying themselves if they weren't lucky. Tiana was wearing a summer dress that perfectly accentuated her figure. If there's a sliding scale from vulgar to respectable, Tiana's outfit that night landed squarely in the middle. It didn't leave much to the imagination, but then again, you needed a dirty imagination to appreciate it. Topher had followed my gaze and was also eyeing Tiana as she made her way through the crowd. "You are one lucky fucker," he said before taking another swig of his beer. "You think," I said. Topher raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "As if you've no idea. I got lucky, she's out of my league. You shouldn't put yourself down, you're an incredible couple, made for each other." I nodded, then looked out from our balcony onto the crowds below. This was why it was such a great place to sit. If the conversation lulled, we could just spend some time people watching. Time spent together is amazing, isn't it? Topher continued. He laughed, and a look of relief washed over his face when I laughed too. He was crossing the line. In fact, he was so far over the line that he was in the next town along. But you know, we were several beers into the evening and hadn't eaten anything yet. Plus, this was just Topher being Topher. My business partner of several years, we didn't socialize much. In some ways, I barely knew him, but this trip to Paris was a spur of the moment celebration of our closing the big deal back home. Topher's wife Marta was supposed to with us, but hadn't turned up for the flight. Maybe Topher would be seeking wife #4 very soon. Who knew? This was kinda why I didn't really want to get too close to him. Topher's life was somewhat wild and somewhat fast, certainly faster than mine would ever be. We worked well as business partners. That was enough for me. "She's very good alone," I said quietly. "She knows what she is doing." Topher laughed again. "You are so buttoned down." I didn't know how to reply, so I didn't. Topher looked down at the beer bottle. "Marta and I. We have problems, you guessed it, right? It has been the same for several months. We are still together. I think they call it a hate of communication. But do you know what I should do with my needs?" I shook my head, somewhat worried as to what he might share next. "I think of your woman." My stomach did a flip. I think about Tiana standing in front of me and making me feel good. God, how I want it. Topher looked at me askance, as if asking for permission for something or other. Then he burst into laughter again. "Oh man, look at you. Are you actually blushing?" My face felt warm, I guess. I tried to smile and I succeeded, but Topher didn't know that I was getting excited. He thought he was going to shock me, and knowing Topher, he did it on purpose. But he had no idea what thoughts he was causing in my head. Accompanied by a smile that could melt granite, Tiana arrived back at the table. I scooted over on the bench seat we were sharing, so she was alongside me again. "Topher was telling me a few secrets about you," I said. Tiana's eyes grew wide. "You told him," she said, staring at Topher. Topher laughed, almost uncontrollably this time. "I have to go to the bathroom," he said as he stood up before making his way through the crowd. Tiana's words had taken physical form and hung in the air above us. "What was that?" I said eventually. "I'm sorry, I've been meaning to tell you for years." "Tell me what?" "Me and Topher were a thing before you met me." "Not really a thing, more off than on." I felt my face start to get warm again. "How could you keep something like that secret?" Not that I could insert that into everyday conversation. "Hey honey, can you buy apples from the store?" "Oh, and I was with your business partner." In any case, it is such a strange thing that it is difficult to describe. When you introduced me to Topher years ago, he didn't recognize me. I don't know why not. I was shocked, but he sincerely believed that he was meeting me for the first time. I mean, you know Topher, a different woman every night. I guess I was just one of them. Did he forget about the relationship? Tiana bit her lip. It wasn't a relationship. Do you know what I mean? No. Friends with benefits. Maybe once or twice a month he'd message me or I'd message him. If we were both free then. I started at the crowd below. Wow, but he obviously does know who you are now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have laughed like that. Do you remember a meeting we had in the boardroom back in the office about a year ago? You and Topher were there. I was there, and so was the accountant. We were talking about that funding application I'd helped you with. I nodded. Well, that was when Topher realized. I walked into the room, and I guess because I was in my dress suit, I must have looked that little bit different. I had my hair up, too. I could tell instantly he'd figured it all out. He looked shocked. Then a smile just expanded across his face. I looked back at him and nodded, then I shook my head, and then it was his turn to nod. His face became blank. That was it. We haven't discussed it, ever. There's been nothing since. Nothing? I mean, his attitude changed towards me after that. It was more like we were old friends. I was fine with that. It felt much easier, more honest. But you weren't honest with me. The thing is, I have told you about him. When? Marta slipped the straw from her cocktail between her full lips during our conversation, mostly lately on the eve of our departure for Paris. Now it was my turn to open my eyes. While I was busy with the process, Marta started talking about guys she had been with in the past. She told me about a guy with a good figure. She said she wished he was there with us the third. There could have been more to this story, but I was instantly hooked. I felt Tiana's hand on me. She gradually moved to other places. Yeah, I thought so, Tiana said sweetly, sensing my excitement. I kissed her deeply, then spoke quietly into her ear. He said he thinks about you when he spends time with Martha. He fantasizes about you in front of him when you make him happy. My darling, I told you weren't the first to do that to me. Did he? More often than not. Topher appeared at the table again, and myself and Tiana rapidly decoupled as he took his seat. Now, what were we talking about? He said. He genuinely appeared to have forgotten. It was probably the beer. Tiana finished what was left in her glass. I was surprised because there was quite a bit of liquid, and the bartender cheerfully mixed it up from several bottles that were considered potent in their own right. Has Marta caught the later flight you mentioned? She asked. Topher looked up at the sky as if to ask for assistance, then took a gulp of beer. No, she's still back home. We're 73% of the way to a divorce. Tiana reached across and put her hand on Topher's. I'm so sorry. Topher shrugged. She kept her hand on his. I realized she was smiling. He reciprocated. I guess you're free to spend time with whoever you want, she said. I guess I am. Maybe later I'll look up an old friend. Somebody passing by observing this scene might have suggested, var Churcher Yun Chamber, that the two of them go get a room. Tiana jumped back in her seat and sat up abruptly. Topher made no secret of his gaze at the amazing figure that was proudly on display under that summery dress. Should we order? She said, picking up the menu. Topher's eyes moved from her to me. He had the same expression of determination he shared with me when, talking to clients, we were close to closing a sale at work. Sounds like a plan, he said. Despite the dropping of these bombs, the night continued as if nothing had been spoken. We ate amazing French food. We drank amazing French wine. The conversation didn't falter as we discussed the luck and skill that had delivered the deal we were celebrating. It would keep our business afloat for years. Suddenly, we had gone from stomach-churning worries about the bottom line every month to realizing the bottom line would take care of itself. We were ecstatic. High on life, the bar began to empty, and under the frowning gaze of a waiter, we realized it was late. A Uber XL was summoned, and we staggered out of the bar, understanding as we stood quite how effective that French wine had been. We piled into the back of the cab, Tiana sitting between me and Topher, and instructed the driver to take us to our hotel in St. Denis. He commented that with Paris traffic being what it was, even at that time of night, we should expect a journey of at least 30 minutes. We collectively shrugged and sat back to enjoy the ride, gazing out the window as the colorful Paris nightlife moved by. Tiana put her hand on me. I could feel the excitement rising in me. I looked over and saw that her hand was also holding Topher. He was smiling slightly, but silently looking out the window. Tiana's hand slid up to meet the contours of my excitement. I knew her other hand was in the same place as Topher's. She turned to me and mouthed silently, "Kiss me." I did so. I raised my hand to her head and opened my eyes to see that Topher was now interested, still with the same slight smile on his face. Tiana's hand massaged the unmistakable contour of his excitement. The taxi driver had also noticed what was happening, his penetrating gaze visible in the rearview mirror. Looking into Tiana's eyes, I placed my hand on hers. I could feel my heart racing as Topher did the same on the other side. I looked at Topher and nodded. He moved his hand a little further to tease Tiana. Tiana had her head all the way back and released a deep sigh. "Hey," said the driver suddenly. "Ni fais pas ça dans ma voiture. Ni fais pas ça dans ma voiture." Topher laughed. He was the best French speaker out of all of us. I knew the driver was saying something about his car, but hadn't discerned much more than that. "Je m'excuse," said Topher. "Nous le garderons pour l'hôtel." The driver nodded firmly. Tiana and I stared blankly at Topher, who was staring out the window with his hands on his lap. Tiana has already adjusted the dress. The driver said he doesn't want us to get his upholstery dirty. We laughed, at least, until I caught the angry glare of the driver in the rearview mirror. The Paris nightlife was now left behind, and the journey had turned into graffitied highways and tunnels. The three of us sat back and waited for the hotel to come into view. The elevator doors closed so very slowly. We had swept across the hotel foyer silently, Tiana still turning heads even amongst the tired and weary travelers who were checking in. "I suppose this is the point where we ask if you want to join us in our room for a drink," I said. Well, I said the first few words of that sentence. I was cut short when Tiana span around and pinned Topher against the mirrored wall of the lift, kissing him deeply. I moved closer to her, pressing against her from behind. She rolled over and suddenly she was kissing me. I reached out to touch her again and felt my hands brush against Topher's as he began to appreciate her incredible figure himself. Tiana pressed into him again. The hotel doors opened and we practically fell out. We reached our room and I began searching my pockets for the keycard. "I took a walk on the boulevards before dinner," said Tiana. "I bought some items you might like." Topher looked at me with the filthiest of all possible grins, as, finally having located the card, I pushed open the door. We'd rented deluxe suites because, well, why not? We had the cash. Tiana moved ahead of us and disappeared into the bedroom. Myself and Topher extracted beers from the minibar. "You're cool with this," said Topher. "She's the boss. I mean, I'd be lying if I hadn't ever thought about it. She told you and me and her our history before you met. Yeah. I'm glad this is happening with you here. I mean, with you involved. I would never have made a move, don't worry about that, but damn if she isn't an incredible woman. I was serious earlier. You're a lucky guy. Why don't you two take a seat on that couch?" said Tiana. We turned to see her standing outside the bedroom, wearing one of hotel's gowns. Topher looked at me with a hapless smile, and we did as we had been told. The dress disappeared, and Topher and I realized that besides food and wine, there is something else France does incredibly well. "Underwear," Topher actually gasped. For my part, I was at a loss for words. "You just look. I mean, it's incredible." "You look incredible." Of course, a figure like Tiana's helped any outfit reach its full potential. Her hourglass figure was perfectly framed. She came back and made us realize that everything about her look is beautiful. I looked away and was really shocked that Topher was enjoying himself by looking at her. One of our female employees had once described Topher as giving off big dick energy, and well, I realized how very true this was. Tiana came up and stood in front. She unbuttoned me and started to please me. She reached out to Topher, playing with him. Tiana was skilled. After a while she broke away from me. She came to be in front of Topher and pleased him. "Jesus, I've missed this," said Topher as I watched. I felt more and more excited. Tiana looked into my eyes as she practiced with Topher. She did not take her eyes off, doing her job. "Your wife knows what she's doing," Topher said, his breath seeming to shorten with each word. Tiana again lifted her head with a gasp of air. "Stand up," she said. Again, myself and Topher followed orders. She beckoned us to her. Tiana began to please us both at the same time. It was a weird feeling when the other guy was on, but it didn't really bother me considering how nice the situation was. "I need more," he said. We moved to the bedroom, myself and Topher hastily shuffling out of our clothes as we made our way there. Topher took Tiana's hand and led her to the bed and stood behind her. I came from the front and we spent time together. Finally, with a look of beautiful agony on her face, and clutching onto the bed as if she was afraid she would fall off the face of the planet, Tiana let out a cry of pleasure. "Yes," Topher said. "Man, I didn't want to finish so soon. Give me a break." Tiana stood up and kissed him. "You're something else," he said, moving to sit in a chair a little distance from the bed. Tiana turned her attention to me. Having climbed on the bed, she lowered herself and came to be with me. It took me a while to realize that Topher had appeared next to the bed, excited again. "Do you want me with you too?" he said. Tiana looked at me. I nodded, she smiled, and then nodded at Topher. I continued to work as I felt Topher join Tiana and me. He was only millimeters away from me. I could feel him, literally next to me, together with Tiana. I preferred him. Tiana let out an almost painful gasp, as she does whenever we try something unusual. "Oh yeah," Topher said slowly. With a constant look of agony on her face, Tiana leaned down and kissed me. Tiana looked like she was going to cry, but I'd seen that look before, and I knew it was something that was deeply satisfying. I felt how she got pleasure, and in a few minutes she was satisfied again. Topher spoke, his voice sounding determined but gasping for air. "I'm close. I'm going to have fun." I was the first one to be satisfied, and to be honest, I was surprised it lasted this long. After me, Topher also enjoyed himself. The atmosphere in the room changed. Panting, I looked at Tiana. Her face was messy, almost completely dirty. Her makeup was smeared and her eyes were closed. I was tired, and I glanced sideways at Topher. He laughed and pulled me close like we were friends at a soccer game, and the team had just scored a goal. "That was incredible," he said. "It certainly was. I gotta go and get a shower, I guess," he said, leaving the bedroom. Tiana flopped back on the bed. "I guess I should clean myself up too," she said, but I had other ideas. I pulled Tiana to me and began to please her. Tiana lost her breath, as if unable to believe what was happening. I knew from previous experience that she wouldn't last long, and sure enough, she screamed in pleasure a few seconds later. I felt the excitement again. We started playing again, this time together. Tiana gasped as if she couldn't believe what I was doing. Soon we were both satisfied. Out of breath, I looked at her. She opened one eye with a dirty face. "How about a nice glass of French wine?" I said. Subscribe to our channel so that your second C, Gaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story. Because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.